Welcome to a new segment that I'm trying on the channel this year. I think I'm going to do maybe one or two of these types of videos a month, and this is where instead of talking about music and all things music, prog, metal, and whatnot, I'm going to be talking about books and reading, because books and reading is like another really big passion of mine. Most of the time when I'm listening to music, I'm reading. So yeah, this might be a good opportunity for you guys to find out what I'm reading, what it's like for me to read, and my thoughts about it. And I think this one's also going to be a little bit more of a chill vibe. I'm thinking of calling this like the cozy corner. I know I had something else. It was going to be like a four-word, two rhyming things. So like cozy corner and like bookish books or something like that. I can't remember. But yeah, definitely like it's a little bit more of a cozy vibe in this one. I'm not going to be as structured, I think. For this first one, I want to talk about my reading habits, how I read, how I like to read, how my reading habits have changed. Because I have dyslexia, and so I struggled first and foremost with reading, and it really was challenging. I didn't actually start reading properly until about like grade 6, grade 7, which was a big struggle for me. It's kind of the ongoing joke in my family that, the kid that struggled to read and still can't spell, and I can't spell, ended up being a librarian. So that's kind of where we're at now. I am still a voracious reader. I don't think I read quite as fast as a lot of my contemporary voracious readers, but I read a lot. So I kind of make up for it in that sense. I have a lot of different methods when it comes to reading. For the longest time, it was just physical books, which is why I've got so many behind me. But recently, within the past, I'd say maybe about 10 years or so, I started getting into the ebooks, and it saved a lot on my pockets. I used to have like one of the first Kobo Glows, and trying to download books onto that boy from the library was a Frankensteinian effort. I have a Mac, Adobe Editions, I think it is, that you needed back in the day. Did not play well with Macs. So I had to kind of finagle that. And as the years went on, unfortunately, it got further and further and further away from being streamlined. So, before, where I was able to just basically go onto the library app, my library app of choice is Libby and Overdrive, download the book after borrowing it, and then using digital editions, just load it up into my Kobo. Then it stopped being supported, so I had to find an older version of the Adobe Editions to download for my Mac in order to get it onto my Kobo, and eventually my Kobo gave up the ghost. It was, about 8 years into its lifespan, and it fell from my bedside table, whacked itself on the ground, and now the charging, I guess the battery to the charging port has disconnected, so it literally cannot charge anymore. So that's where that is now. Luckily, last year I got the new Kobo boy here, so this is what I'm currently using, and I use it quite regularly. So, I've got my book that I'm reading right now. There's what I'm reading right now, The Bog Wife. I think my next video will actually be me going into the books that I've read this past month, like in January. So I do a lot of reading on this guy. I do a lot more reading on this one than I did on my other one, because the Overdrive app is physically in this. If I turn this boy on, there's my thing there, and I go back to the home right there, I just, right down at the bottom, view your books on Overdrive. So, I don't think I've ever actually bought a book for this. I've always just used Overdrive because you get them for free. And little pro tip, if you don't already know, if you turn the Wi-Fi off, you don't have to worry about expiry dates. Because you only get like, say, 3 or 4 weeks per title. Turn the Wi-Fi off, you have it indefinitely. It's just the moment you turn Wi-Fi back on, they expire. So yeah, I'm reading The Bog Wife right now through Overdrive, and the other books that I'll be talking about in my next video have also come from that. So that's at the moment, my main way of reading books. I've read, I think, 3 out of the 5 books that I read in January on my Kobo, and I'm currently reading my book here on my Kobo. That's just kind of like how I've changed in my reading habits, because again, it used to be 100% physical books. And it used to be fine, but if I were going away, if I were traveling or whatnot, carrying 3 or 4 books used to be pretty cumbersome. I didn't mind because I still love the aesthetic and I still love the whole reading a physical book, and I have plenty of books in here that I haven't actually read yet. The one specifically behind my shoulder right there has been calling to me. But all in good time, the TBR is infinitely growing. Another way that I've been reading books lately, I picked it up last year, is through audio. Libby, through the app, has some amazing audiobooks. So, my big way of reading it right now is just through the Libby app. And I'll start the Libby app here so everybody can see. There's the Libby app. It says The Bog Wife. Apparently 5 people are waiting for it. But I've got about 3 or 4 different audiobooks on here that I'm currently working my way through. So I've got, those boys there that I'm working on. I do a lot of road trips because I live up in North Bay. In here, there's a good example of it. So because I do so many road trips from North Bay down to Muskoka to visit my father, or down to Toronto to visit the rest of my family, that's a good 2.5 to 4 hours drive one way. I can whip through an audiobook in one trip, going down and back. I also play a lot of audiobooks when I'm playing video games, which I've been doing quite a bit more of this past year. So I think 1/3 of all the books that I read in 2024 were through audiobooks, and my favorite experience of reading this past year in 2024 was an audiobook. And up until that point, from last year, I never really read a book through the audio format. It's always been just through the visual means. So it was a really interesting kind of experiment for myself just to try it out. And I will admit, the first handful of books I didn't quite connect with. I still enjoyed it, but I find it's nonfiction that I enjoy the most through audiobook, because I feel as if my brain thinks it's more like a podcast, and I listen to quite a bit of podcasts. So because I think of it more as a podcast rather than a book, even though it's still a book, it's a little bit easier for me to digest and get into. I also realize that if it's not a radio play and there's only one narrator and they're doing a plethora of different voices, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I read, I think, 2 audiobooks last year that were more romantic and were romanticy. That was very interesting when it was a woman speaking and narrating, and she was trying to do the voices of the men characters, especially when it was starting to get to some of those more spicy scenes, shall we say. That was very entertaining for me. Yeah, so that's been my kind of reading journey within the past little bit. If any of you are fans of the podcast Reading Glasses, that is where I get a lot of my good recommendations for books. They're always recommending some really great stuff. I have Mallory's book behind me here. She's amazing, and Bria does a great job of the two playing off one another, and their reading habits are just amazing. Anyway, the reason why I bring this up is they talk a lot about wheelhouses and what it is that draws you to books. And I think I'm going to end this little introductory video with introducing some of my wheelhouses, some of the things that I enjoy, and what, if I read it on the back of a book or on the spine or whatever, wherever there's a synopsis or something, the moment I see something, it's I'm picking up this book. First off, I actually haven't thought about this. I just kind of did it out the top of my head. First off, I really love dark fantasy. And what I mean by dark fantasy is kind of horror, fantastical things. So things like vampires, things like ghosts, werewolves, kind of monsters in that sense. And I really love when they take a little bit of a spin on that. I mean, vampires are probably my favorite. Next is probably ghosts, and then probably werewolves. I love a good haunted house book as well. In fact, one of the books that I'll be talking about in my next video is a haunted house adjacent kind of a thing, and I really, really enjoy those. I also love power dynamics, but kind of in a body switching thing. Really love whenever there's body switching going on, or a point of view change in that kind of a sense. That immediately draws me to it. I also like reading a lot of LGBTQ stuff, just because I find the heteronormative stuff gets really old and really stale. And I like things that change up the format and change up the narrative a little bit more. So I will more often read, specifically in the romance stuff. more of the like LGBTQ plus, like the queer stuff, rather than just a heteronormic kind of thing, because I'm like, okay, well, if I wanted that, I could read the billions of books that are already out in that kind of a sense. And I like new things. I like different things. And I guess that's the other thing. Like, I always love different kinds of things. When it comes to like nonfiction, I really love historical things. Maybe not history books, but like I love like medical history. I love when it comes to like psychological history and things like that. Environmental things, those always like really pique my interest in that sense. But I'm not like the biggest thing of like memoirs and biographies and things like that. I'm much more like topic centric than I am like person centric, if that makes any sense. Yeah, that's kind of like where my wheelhouses tend to be. I also like, I love all shapes and sizes of horror. My favorite probably being like cosmic horror, but more in like a contemporary modern take, like kind of like pushing against some of the more racist and homophobic stuff from the original like H.P. Lovecraft stuff, and like really addressing some of the horrors that he was talking about in like the humanity side of things. So like books like The Fisherman or Lovecraft Country or Ballad of Dark Tom and The King and All of His Worms, or The Worm and All of His Kings. That's the one. Those are the books that I go to. So yeah, those are kind of like my wheelhouses. That's what kind of brings me to a book, and if I see any of that in, you know, the descriptions, I'm immediately picking it up. I think that's where I'm going to end it. This was just kind of like a little bit of an introduction. It's just kind of like a free floating, this is how I like to read, and this is how I'm currently reading. Yeah, maybe in the, you know, in future episodes, I'll do more of like my history, the struggles that I had, how I kind of overcame them when it came to being a very, they call them hesitant readers. Like when I was a school librarian, it was always like hesitant readers, but I was never hesitant. I love to read. It was just a struggle for me. So maybe struggling readers would be a better nomiker for it. I think that's kind of where I'm going to leave it off for today. Let me know of your own wheelhouses. Let me know of your own, you know, what books you're currently reading. Let me know if this series is something that you want to see me do more of. I've got 2 videos, this one included, already scheduled. So you're going to get a couple of them, and I'm going to, you know, try them for a couple of months just to see if the numbers go up for these videos or if I'm just talking into the void. I figured this series will be more of like a cozy, you know, kind of a second screen, as they've called it. You know, this is something that you put on while you're doing laundry or, you know, doing the dishes, or you just kind of want something in the background. And I'll just kind of be here to provide company. So yeah, that's where I'm going to leave it for today. Thank you all so much for watching and starting this journey of me. You know, this all kicked off when I was doing my favorite books of the year. Honestly, of all the year-end videos, that was the one that was performing the least well. But this was also the one that I was more excited for. So that's where I'm going to leave it. Once again, thank you all so much for watching. As always, you guys are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out.